Well, it's finally the end of the week and time to look back at the top business stories over the last 7 days or so. We have our editor-at-large, Craig Copetas. He is in Paris. Our senior business producer, Andre-Pierre du Plessis, is in the Istanbul newsroom. And Max Wolf from 55 Capital is joining us from New York. Let's start now in South Africa, where thousands of demonstrators took to the streets on Friday, calling for the removal of the president, Jacob Zuma. It follows his unexpected firing of his finance minister, which led to South Africa's currency plunging 10% in 6 days. A string of ministers resigned after that, including the head of the country's treasury. This week, both Standard & Poor's and Fitch cut South Africa's credit rating to junk over worries about political uncertainty. Let's start with AP in the Istanbul newsroom. AP, you're from South Africa. You know the country really well. Tell us about Zuma. Is he safe or is he going to be pushed out of power?
Well, Zuma only won the elections last year, so he's pretty safe. He's already made it clear that he won't try and win another term as president of the ruling party. But the next election is only in 2 years. I think what was so interesting this week, following the story from his sacking last week of the finance minister, is, as you pointed out, these rating agencies who have now, one after the other, cut the investment grade of South Africa. I want to show you a chart or a graph just to show you this has happened before. Back between 1998 and 2001, South Africa went through something similar. We are now just awaiting one more ratings agency who said that maybe next week, that's Moody's, they will cut South Africa's investment grade to junk. Now, what's so interesting for me about this story is during the protest on Friday was when Fitch announced that they will downgrade the country. And it really emboldened people because investment grade ratings have become some of national pride. And we've even seen this here in Turkey last year. So I think maybe an interesting question that we can put to our guest, Max, in New York. You know, is this something that we can anticipate seeing from specifically emerging markets where ratings agencies, all based in New York, have now become such a big role in these countries where there's so much political turmoil?
There's a certain amount of a sense around the world that American rating agencies have played double standards. In other words, they've been a little bit kinder to governments that the United States has better political relationships with, and a little bit harsher to governments that the United States has more strained political relationships with. While I'm not sure that's completely true, that has really been a factor, an irritant that's made people feel nationalistic about this. And I think we'll see even more of that in the years to come, particularly as the globalization comes under significant pressure and folks generally around the world feel more nationalistic about economic and political matters.
Okay, Max, let's turn to the United States now. And Fox News saw record-breaking ratings, but its top anchor is in the spotlight for all the wrong reasons. Over 50 companies pulled advertising from Bill O'Reilly's show this week over allegations of sexual harassment. The US President Donald Trump is, however, defending his friend, which made us think it's an ideal opportunity to play a clip from an interview with O'Reilly that Trump had 2 years ago.
The president of China is coming, a man named Xi Jinping. Do you know Xi Jinping? I never heard of him. I don't know who he is. But he's the president. He's coming over. If you were president, would you throw him a big dinner?
I would not be throwing him a dinner. We've had this conversation. I'd get him a McDonald's hamburger and I'd say, we got to get down to work because you can't continue to devalue.
Well, there you go, Craig Copetas in Paris. I'd get him a Big Mac. Well, it looks like Trump has seen that the pragmatic ways to move forward with his presidency, he has to throw him a bit of a banquet in the summer White House.
Yeah, well, I think the only thing with Bill O'Reilly is that the only people who watch him, according to the audience figures, are old people, really old people, like my father. And he's going to kind of vanish by his own accord, and heaping opprobrium on him is not going to do any good. I mean, with all this fuss over O'Reilly, you know, three things have to be remembered. He's never been charged in a court of law for sexual harassment. He's never been convicted of sexual harassment. and he has an ironclad contract with Fox, and he makes a lot of money for the network. And that money that he makes for the network goes to a lot of shareholders. So it's a symbiotic relationship.
Let's just bring in AP once again.
Charges him.
Yeah, I think there's...
Let me bring in AP really quickly. It's not the only advertising story that's on people's minds this week, is it?
Yes, on Wednesday, this was a pretty big deal across the world. Pepsi dropped a new global ad, and this just adds to another brand in crisis. It stars the reality TV star Kendall Jenner. She walks up to a police officer during a riot. She hands him a can of Pepsi and then kind of resolves the whole conflict. Now, it has come under extreme criticism to the point that Pepsi had to pull the ad because a lot of protesters, a lot of people who have been part of the Black Lives Matter movement say that this has co-opted the protest movement for commercial gain specifically, and this is perhaps the harshest criticism, came from a tweet from Martin Luther King Jr.'s daughter, who said, let me read the tweet, "If only Daddy would have known about the power of Pepsi."
Right, let me bring in Max Wolf there in New York. Max, that's a very sad little joke there at Pepsi's expense. But let me ask you about the publicity that Pepsi has got out of this anyway. Is there any sneaking suspicion that the old maxim that there's no such thing as bad publicity is at work here, or do you really think that Pepsi will suffer from this misjudgment?
Yeah, so I think, look, attention is always good, but this is definitely not the kind of attention you want. Pepsi did seek and has historically tried to sort of get buzz, get attention. They did succeed, but in exactly the wrong way. So what they keep trying to do historically, and what they were clearly trying to do here, is say that Pepsi is the choice of the new generation, different from their parents, the folks who are shaking things up, who are asking difficult questions, who are protesting or sympathetic to folks who are protesting, not the folks who don't know how to do controversial and end up kind of being like your dad making a dirty joke in front of your friends. And I think they sort of, they wanted to make a grand entrance, and I think they kind of fell down the stairs.
Yeah, Craig,
AP,
let's come back to you quickly.
AP, no, I just want to know, AP, am I out of the loop here? Because I have no friggin' idea who Kendall Jenner is.
I had to look up myself. I have to admit, I don't follow her.
Okay, gentlemen, just...
I mean, if it had been Matt Moore, I would have understood.
Yeah, of course. Before we go and have a bit of a break on the weekend, let's just take a look at what each of you is keeping an eye on for next week. Max, if I could start with you, what's important for you next week?
So we're going to look really closely at the retail sales number, especially given how weak U.S. retail has been and how important that is to the economy. In the weak jobs report we got today, we're also going to pay attention to the CPI, the inflation rate, which we get, and we're also going to pay attention to consumer sentiment. There's been a big divide developing here between gauges of people's optimism and gauges of economic activity. We'll get really good readings on those Thursday, Friday. That's what we'll be concentrating on.
AP, over to you.
Well, I'll be looking out for the Pulitzer Prizes that will be announced on Monday, not only because we hope that our very own Craig Copetas will win one, but it also is a good gauge to see exactly how media companies are doing and whether the New York Times are indeed failing, as Donald Trump enjoys
You mean win another one, surely. Craig, over to you.
Make a loop on me through May 5th. French elections, they're never ending, but they will be over on Sunday, May 7th. Stay tuned.
All right, Craig Copetas, thank you so much for that.